हेलो मैम।
Yeah,
बस मैम रिकॉर्डिंग ऑन कर दीजिए आप, ताकि मैं बाद में भी इसको देख सकूं।
yeah, definitely. Recording on है.
ओके मैम।
So, I hope आप लोग screen देख सकते हैं. The word file. Can you see the screen?
यस मैम।
Okay. So, yeah. In the last class, we were discussing about majorly about what is the type of interaction between the citizens and the administration that's happening. Uh, Especially in the case of India. Then also we discussed about what should be the perception of the citizen, or what is actually the perception of the citizen about the administration, and how if there are some limitations, how that can be overcome. That also we discussed in the last session. Also we looked at the various preconditions for a citizen centric administration to take place, which included many principles like the accountability, the responsiveness of the governance, the transparency that is required, then the efficiency, the effectiveness, the importance of economy. So many things, many of these conditions which are actually required, even the bureaucratic, how the bureaucracy or the bureaucrats should behave with the citizens, what kind of a response, what kind of an integrity they should have towards their service. So such many preconditions that which are very much required for the development of a citizen centric administration we discussed in the last class. And then again, one of the students in my class last day arise this question: what is public service delivery actually is about. So I was actually planning to take it in this class, because I just wanted to give you an introductory idea of what is citizen, what is the citizen, and what is the relation between citizen and administration, then the citizen centric administration is all about. So today we will move towards that topic, the public service delivery, what it is all about. When someone say that it's the public service delivery is happening. So in simple terms, if you see, a public service means that the services which are provided by a government to its citizens, that can be either directly or even by financing the private provisions of such services. So the delivery of such services, or delivery of such public goods and services, that is actually considered as one of the basic responsibilities of the state. That's why we actually created the state for ourselves. Even if you look at the theories, the social contract theory of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, so the major aim behind it was that in that state of nature, the individual or of course it's the individual, not the citizen, then the individual is actually thinking about his own well-being. So when you have an authority or a system where you can get an equal kind of treatment, and or an equal kind of policies for your development or the welfare, then there forms the need for a system that can provide you with the development policies, or the better for the betterment of the citizens, and that we consider as an authority of the state, or the governance itself. So that's actually considered as the responsibility of the state to provide the delivery of various public goods and services. uh, can Naman please switch off the video, because I'm getting a little bit distracted because of that. Thank you, Naman. So, yeah, so we were talking about the delivery of various public goods and services. That's as the one of the major responsibilities of the state. So then again, the state has a very important role to play in making the essential goods and services available to it, and also ensuring that a certain minimum level of well-being to everyone who are in need of those services and goods from the government. So these services would generally be required in large numbers, and yet the financial and other resources available are always unlimited, or there is a constraint in that. At the same time, the quality of the services is mainly constrained by the managerial inefficiency also that we experience in that we normally experience in our country also. So to improve the quality and the quantity of the services that is actually delivered to the citizens, what needs to be done is that the government actually resorts to continuous improvements in the structure, or continuous improvements in the service delivery mechanisms. So there is thus this need for delivering the services efficiently and also effectively to ensure that there is a desired level of well-being, that's to all the concerned, and within as short time span, or short time span, or even for a short period of time. So there actually the a special care needs to be taken for the delivery of the services to definitely the poor, so as they majorly depend on the public services for the survival. In the present condition, if you see the lack of oxygen cylinders, or the lack of oxygen supply services in the hospitals during this pandemic, it's actually having a major effect on the population, if you see. So if that delivery mechanism, or the delivery of that public good, or that public service related to the oxygen cylinders and supply of oxygen, if that is given to the private sector, do you think that the poor people in the society are going to get the benefits from that? So that is actually one of the major current recent examples, if I can put forward, in the case of a public delivery mechanism, where the government is actually trying to help its citizen without considering their economic stability, their economic position in the society, and helping them to bring about their welfare during this pandemic. Then also to serve the customers effectively. If you have the experience of the private sector, then we have seen that the private sector segment, their customer bases are according to the various factors that includes the demographic profile, or the age, or the economic status, to provide them a more personalized service. If you look at the services provided by the private sector, so they have their own particular concerns. Okay, we are focusing on such groups only, but that is not the case with government, the public institutions, to say. And also in the private sector, the competitiveness in the market, that ensures actually the efficiency of the delivery of public services and goods. But when you look at the public services, it's actually having, if you say, I can use that word monopoly, because there is a lack of actually competition that tends to make the service a little bit sloppy. So further in the public sector, if you see, in contrast to the public private sector, so there is it is crucial to understand the. So can the mics be muted, please? So, yeah. We were talking about the public sector monopoly. So, normally, because of the lack of competition, or lack of Definitely the competition. So that make the public sector services a little bit sloppy. But then again, in contrast with the private sector, uh, we have to understand that the nature of the policy outcomes required as well as the customer outcomes required. So these are actually two different like zones altogether. So unlike the private sectors where the organization is at the liberty to define its customer segments, the public sector is actually required to service the numerous diversified customer segments. So that's where the crucial significance of the public sector lies, that it's essential to develop the clear policies to meet the needs of each of the segments. So then again, the private sector has to follow the principles of fairness and equity, which are actually considered very much important when we come to examine the concept of quality in the public administration. Also, when you look at the major difference between public and the private sector, so they also differ significantly in the service relationship with the external customers. So in the case of the private sector, if you see, the relationship between the service provider and the customer is normally uh, direct in nature, but comparatively even straightforward also. While in the public sector, if you see, they provide a customer relationship which is often more complex and indirect in nature because of the diversification of the population, diversification of the customer. For the public sector, it's the citizens. So that's where the complexity and an indirect relationship between the citizen and the government comes. Then also in addition to their this primarily non-commercial character of the public sector, they are also often distinguished by an absolute or even at least a comparative a form of a lack of competition in the normal market sense of seeking to entice the customers away from their competitors or even the rival service providers. So given the regulatory role that's often performed by the public sectors, such as that in the case of tax collection or in the case of law enforcement, so they can be a mandatory institution apart from being so monopolistic or even oligopolistic, if you say, in their character. So that's the difference between the public sector services and the cases of private sector services. Then again, if you look at the public service delivery, so that actually faces several barriers even in the in the recent times also. So few of them I have listed it over here for your attendance. That's the first one is about poverty. So due to the difficulty in accessing services, including their own failure to bear the implied cost even for receiving the free services, just like that of the free medical services that is available or the free educational services that is available to the citizens. So poverty is one of the major or one of the crucial foremost barrier the citizens in India face to access the free public services that are available to them. The next one is a physical factor that is majorly due to the lack of infrastructure. So if you see the rural areas where the normally the poorer sections of the society lives in the rural area. I'm not obligating the fact that there are urban poor also. We have like we know that, but then again a larger proportion of the poorer sections of the society resides in the is still in the rural areas of India. So they live in those remote and difficult areas where the access is very difficult. For example, the tribals. There are many tribal groups who stay within the dense forest where it's very much difficult to have a direct link with them, or they actually doesn't have a direct link with the outside world. So then again they face this lack of infrastructure service, infrastructure over there. Even the many in the rural areas still face a lack in the banking services, the medical services are lacking, even the educational services are lacking. So if you see, like of course there are many acts, the RT um, Right to Education Act is also there, that provides free and compulsory education to the students. With that, we have seen many schools coming up, many government schools being brought up and uh, getting redeemed and all. But then again, still there are many rural areas that lack even the primary schools, and there are many rural areas, even though they have a primary school there, they doesn't have the required number of teachers to take classes, or they doesn't have even the basic facilities like toilets, separate toilets, even toilets as such, even separate toilets for girls and boys, even a place, a proper place, a proper room for taking classes and also that is there. Then even if you take the case of the primary health centers in India, even though there are primary health centers throughout every village and block, if you say, but then again, how much functional they are, if you look at their functionality in the rural areas majorly, so then you can understand what the condition is. Recently, I'll give you one of my personal experiences. Recently, we my parents had to take the COVID vaccination. So I, even living in Delhi at this proper place for almost 10 years, like last week or last to last week, I came to know that there is a public health center nearby my place. So even though like I am a bit educated, even then at that case, even if you are not aware of that such a thing is working near your, like in your place, so you can understand the condition of the rural poor, what is happening to them. And that's not just related to the infrastructure, it's all about, also about the awareness that we have, it's also about the functionality. So when we reached there, we understood that okay, this has a particular timing and there are very few, like very few number of uh, people working over there, and even there are very numerous number, like countable number you can say, or the services are even limited over there. It's just that because of the pandemic they have opened it and it's working. So that is another barrier the rural poor are actually facing to avail the services. Then there is also associated vested interest leading to the private gains if the services fails, like in the case of the rice, kerosene, sugar, or whatever you see that's related to the PDS system. So there are instances where we have seen hoarding happening in the public distribution system. We have seen that uh, people who are actually related to the ration shops, they are actually holding the supplies to them, to the shop, and they are actually selling it in the open market at a higher prices without giving it to the needy and the poor. Then also the another major barrier that's behind is the uh, less efficiency and corruption, which are prone because of the low voice or the lack of responsiveness of the service providers. Then there are also psychological barriers. The service providers are actually from better socio-economic background, and they have a much higher income than the people whom they serve. So then the service providers normally, if you say in the case of the public sector, the bureaucrats, they normally may not understand the basic requirements of in the grassroots levels, because there are like at times we have read people writing about this thing that you cannot understand the reality of the rural area or the grassroots level if you sit inside an air conditioned room and write about it, about the problems of the people. For that you will have to reach the grassroots levels, you have to stay with the people over there, then only you can understand what are the problems actually they are facing. So that is again, there is this psychological barrier where the free services are the poor people are actually facing facing difficulty in accessing the free services provided by the public sector. Then again, there is the mismatch between the time slot uh, the client has and when the services are provided. So there are also language barriers, then particularly in the areas which are inhabited by the linguistic minorities. So that can also be a barrier if you see for the poor people to access the free public services. So the fact is that the society has, of course, various forms of discrimination and deprivations, which should be reduced, and therefore the resources should be allocated, that there is justice and equity in the outcome of all the public services. It's even more important to ensure that the services actually delivered effectively and efficiently for attaining the desired outcomes of the government. So that's where it is necessary to understand which what are the various aspects of the delivery of the public services. So one of the major aspect if you see is the bureaucracy. So if you look at the bureaucracy in India, it has actually expanded substantially after the independence, with the introduction of many welfare activities for improving the socio-economic status of the citizen. But the bureaucracy has actually failed in transforming itself by developing the right attitude and even responsiveness towards the citizen, and also in perceiving that they have an obligation in reaching various public services to the citizen as their right. Also the by for providing the services, that again require an interaction, of course, between the service provider and also the client or the customers or the citizens in the case of the public sector. So the service provider should be also in once providing the service have to be responsible to the need of the people. So without understanding the need of the people, what kind of a service the bureaucrats or the governance is actually going to deliver. So that is also one of the major concerns. Then also the in the last class also, if you remember, we have discussed this point that there should be a commitment to change, to accept the change in the institutional arrangement for transforming the delivery system uh, based on the requirements, based on the recent requirements, or based on the recent changes that is happening in the market. That is also an urgent need for improving the services to the poor. So the service delivery to the poor people can be improved when the service provision system uh, remains people centric in nature, or when the people are given the right to make the choices for them. So making services work, that actually requires changing the making the services work actually requires the changing the institutional relationship among the key factors which are involved in the service delivery mechanism, and also even incentivizing them. So too often we have seen the services fail to reach the poor people, uh, for in their access, in even in quantities, even in the quality also, like quality and the quantity majorly comes when in the case of PDS we have experiences, we have several studies that put up this idea of the public services, the poorer public services, in quantity, in quality, and even in access also. So then like, as you can see on the screen, there are several ways by which these services, the public services, can be improved. So the first and the foremost one is by increasing the poor clients choice and power over service providers and their participation in the service delivery, so that they can monitor and also discipline the providers. The second way is that by raising the poor citizens' voice through the ballot box and making informations widely available, so that the service can be increased by demand for the better public services, and also that can in a way force the politicians to act in a responsive manner, or in a transparent manner even. Then also by rewarding the effective and penalizing the ineffective delivery of services to the poor people. So this is actually one of the major ways by which the public services can be improved. So these are few of the suggestions that we normally arise from the citizens that we are facing these days. Then again, the improvement in the public service delivery also depends upon or an improved or a better public service delivery system. If we talk about that, that majorly depends upon the first one is the easy access and availability of public servants to the citizens, their responsiveness, their accountability, in regard to the public service delivery mechanism, that can bring about major or crucial changes in the better public service delivery mechanism. The second one is about the transparency in the administrative system, so that the citizens will be able to assert their rights, and the government will be able to establish a stronger relationship or a stronger focus on the customers, on the citizens whom they are serving. The third method can be depends on the accountability, so that in case of a failure to the delivery services or a delay in the services to be provided, so that the concerned officials in the government will be brought to book, or will be brought to compensate, provide a compensation to the citizen. uh, Even benchmarking of the services, like and the quality certifications like ISO 9000 ISI, so these can also ensure the value for money, efficiency, and also the productivity in the operations. Next method is by monitoring of the public services, by of course by the involvement of the citizens groups, voluntary association, professional bodies, universities, and other civil society organizations or groups per se. So the monitoring of public services is definitely done by the government institutions, but even the administration. So then again, if there is an involvement of the citizens or the civil society organizations within the evaluation process, then again that can bring in much realities to the forefront. That is the major aim behind monitoring of public services by the involvement of citizens in it. Then again, a good complaint management system for all the departments of the government, with citizen advisory committees to oversee the grievance management system, is another method for an improved public service delivery. Also, the simplification of the processes, the forms and procedures, the rules and regulations as people driven and not rule driven. So many a times we have seen that the literacy level in the rural areas are very poor. If you see, even in the case of urban also, the level are not much better in many places to see. So then and even an illiterate person, it's difficult for them to understand many of the terms or phrases used by the government in the rules and regulations that they normally bring out. So if the awareness is made, if the rules and regulations and even the forms to be applied, even the procedures that the citizens has to follow, if that is simplified and if it is made citizen friendly, or normally we say for the artificial intelligence it's user friendly, so similar way, if the system, if the procedures are made citizen friendly, so then in that case again the public delivery mechanism can be improved to a greater heights of that is again a reason. Then again, there are strong measures against corruption and speedy punishment of the government officials found collecting bribes from the citizens can also improve better public delivery mechanism. Then also with the requirements of the time, the usage of the information and technology for easy access to information to improve the citizen administration interface is also a major can play a major role in improved services. So saying all these putting in all these ideas for an improved public service delivery system. So the major fact is that this we can the public services, so they can match their responsibilities with their capabilities by doing so, and also to ensure the quality of the service delivery and the accountability of the delivery system, the effectiveness, the efficiency, the economy of the public service, that needs to be actually analyzed through various methods like the citizens charter or various external audits such as the social audit or the people's audit, even the report cards. So such systems are available in different systems of governance, if you see throughout the world order. So about the citizens charter and the various other mechanisms that we have in India for the public service grievance redressal mechanisms, so that we will be discussing in the later part of this session. So, since we were dealing with the public delivery mechanism, so one of the major models that India has so far developed, it's called the Sevottam model. So, the Sevottam model is actually the form of a quality management system which is developed by the Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Service Grievances of Government of India. So the term Sevottam is actually a combination of the two Hindi words Uttam and Seva, which forms the Sevottam, and Uttam is like good and Seva is the service. So it's again backed by the Indian standards, which was actually helping it create for the certifying achievement of excellence in service delivery in the government service sector. So then again the quality management system that is being provided by the Sevotam model. So it brings out the framework that provides the answer through the modules that can help to identify gaps in the in the service delivery that's provided by the government. So with that, the citizen charter that actually specifies and publishes the standards of the service delivery. So it's actually a statement of what the citizen charter is actually a statement of what the public agencies are ready to offer as its services. So what are the rights and the entitlements of the people with reference to those services, and also the remedies that is available to the citizens to kind of so that the problems and the disputes that arise in the transaction can be resolved. So all these informations are uh, like kind of published and specified in the citizens charter. We will deal with the in detail about the citizen charter in the later part. Then again, the quality management system or the Sevota model that we developed also provide the idea of the public grievance redress mechanism, that that is the process of receiving the complaints from the citizens when standards in the citizens charters are not met in the service delivery that it is concerned. So once the grievance has been recorded and classified as to who is actually responsible for redressing the same all concerned have to act within the promised time frame. So it is equally important that the preventive measures are taken to reduce the grievances, so that there is a less a requirement of taking the corrective steps when the public grievance redress mechanism is concerned. The third measure is the delivery capability. So the capacity building has for service delivery to bring improvements on a continuous basis. So to know the service recipients better in terms of their satisfaction level, which do not always come as a complaint, then by improving the attitude and the skill of the employees, and also for providing the necessary infrastructure for performance. So all these comes under the delivery capability. So then from here, so these are the basic this is the basic idea behind what the public service delivery is all about, and what are the barriers when one look at the public delivery service in India, and how can that be improved, and what is the latest recent measures that uh, or one of the recent measure that we in India have administered to address the barriers or uh, of the failure or the drawbacks of the public delivery system that we are having. So from here, moving towards another major topic of this citizen-centric administration, that is the people's participation in administration. Why we consider the people's participation in administration is that who forms the administration, or like for whom the administration is administered. So that is where the answer to the question why we should look at the people's participation in administration lead us to. So majorly, like if you look at the concept of people's participation, so it is actually about the direct involvement of the citizens in the process of the administration, uh, administrative processes like that of decision making, policy formulation, policy implementation, and these days even evaluation also. Also it means that the collective and continuous efforts by people themselves in setting goals, pooling resources together, and taking action which aim at improving their living conditions. So that is where the importance of the people's participation in administrative process also lies, that they citizens are actually in a direct involvement with the governance or the administrative bodies for preparing or their the policies required to them, for evaluating the policies that have already been administered, or even for addressing the requirements of the resources, or addressing taking actions towards the various drawbacks of the government. So then again, this term citizen participation comes into the picture. So that again means that the ordinary men and women, being the citizens of the country, they are participating directly in the policy making services of the country. Then it also means that it embodies this shift in the development paradigm from citizens merely as the recipients of the development to the one that views the citizens as an active participant in the development process. So that is where the citizen centric or the citizen involvement in the citizen participating or the citizen involvement in the governance process. So that also brings in the citizens participation or the people's participation per se. It involves a shift from the top down to a bottom top approach to the development, which involves the increasing decentralization of power, definitely away from the center to the towards the global, uh, towards the grassroots levels to say. It then again the citizen participation kind of it refers to the mechanism and also the modalities by which citizens can influence and take control over the resources and the decision making that directly impacts their life. So if you the concept of citizen participation in governance is essentially based on the premise that the citizens have a legitimate role in influencing the decision making process that affects their lives, their business, or even the communities. So that's where we see the citizen participation as a mechanism and modality by which the citizen can generally influence and take control over the resources and also the decision making that directly impacts their life. So if you see at an ideological level, so the direct citizens participation in governance is seen as contributing uh, to a healthy democracy, because it actually helps to enhance and improve upon the traditional form of a representative government or a representative democracy, to transform it the representative governance into a more responsive, a more participatory grassroots democracy. So, but now it's widely accepted that the active citizens' participation can also contribute to the good governance, because we have a tradition of the grassroots level governance. Because of the implementation of the 73rd and the 74th amendment, we have seen the rural governance and the urban governance, and how that has actually brought in a new form of governance where the government, the central government and the state governments are actually they had to bring about transparency, they had to bring about a responsiveness and accountability, rather than just being a representative government. They had to become responsive in their way of administration. So that has that we have seen. So there lies the significance of the active citizens participation. That the first and major one is that it contributes to good governance in the administration, in the system. Then the second significance is that it enables the citizens to make government accountable, more responsive, efficient, and also effective. The next one is that the active citizens participation helps to make the government the policies, programs, and services more effective and sustainable in nature. It also helps to it also helps, or it also enables the poor and the marginalized to influence the public policy and also the service delivery to improve their lives. The uh, this is again from the experience of India, that we have seen that the active participation of the citizens helps the individual, of course, to develop a sense of civic maturity. They become more educated, tolerant, and compassionate, which finally helps in improving the quality of the policy. Also, the active participation helps in recognizing that the citizens actually have a vital contribution to make the betterment of the public policy, and also they play a vital role in promoting the healthy grassroots democracy, and they provide a better understanding, they bring in a better understanding between the government and the people also. So the people's participation definitely in administration, uh, even even though it promotes these things, it's again even in the case of India, it's not free from the barriers. So like if you look at the barriers faced by people's participation in the administration, so majorly these are the few of them that I could point towards to you right now. So one of them is being the existence of widespread inertia in the larger society, which results in apathy and also passivity. So in addition to that, under the name of the people's participation, what usually happens is the terms we call the abdication or the pacification, uh, or cooperation or a client building things. So these are generally seen in the name of people's participation in our economy or in our administrative system. Then also the citizens participation, which does not necessarily lead to the leaders representing their constituencies. Rather, they strike tie up with the local bureaucracy, which may again silence the people. Then also the representatives, when they interface with the bureaucrats, they actually represent their interest, individual interest at those times, not what the constituencies in interest is all about. Then also we have seen that it has been several times observed that the citizens' participation, when not prudently directed, may add to unnecessary delay in the decision making and also implementation, and that again finally increase the red tapeism. So the fact that participatory efforts occasionally are perverted does not mean that the perversions actually make the participatory movement meaningless towards in the original purposes. So citizens participation actually demands certain preconditions which have been laid with a view to make it more effective, so, such like the requirement of an enlightened political leadership, or the citizens should be acknowledged and competent enough to understand the decision making process. The the responsiveness and accountability of the civil servant, of course, and the an informed and a cooperative general public, or the awareness level should be there. Then there is also, if you see, a requirement for ensuring that the information for taking decisions are actually clear and of course precise, so that the general public understands that. Also there is a need for a well organized communication network, if you see, for the awareness to pass on. Then also, if you see, both the authority and the citizen must demonstrate a willingness to take the responsibilities related to the decision making process, and also in the preparation of the public policies, if you see. Then again, conducting a practical survey of the environment for each, which it is intent, and also the participation levels that have to be assured at both the urban and the rural levels. So these are a few of the areas that needs to be considered when we look at the people's participation in administration. Then from here, moving towards the another major topic, that is the administrative accountability. So like we talked about the public delivery mechanism, then we came to the the people's participation, the various the concept related to it, the barriers it faces, or the improvement methods also we discuss. Then right now we are going to discuss about the administrative accountability. So I hope you can understand the order in which we are considering each and every topic. So once we talked about the public service delivery, we actually discussed about the barriers the public service delivery is facing. So one of the major barriers was about an inactive people's participation in the administration procedure. So that's why we dealt with people's participation initially. Then the other major uh, reason that we face as a barrier in the proper or improved public service delivery mechanism is the lack of an administrative accountability towards. So that's why the second major topic that we are going to discuss today is the administrative accountability. So if you remember in the last class also, we have discussed about the accountability. So there again, we discussed it as the part of a barrier in the as also in the name of a barrier, and also how to improve the services that's provided to the citizens, or the for a citizen centric administration there should be this factor of this notion of accountability to be ensured. So in that manner we discussed about it. So in detail we are going to discuss about it now. So when you look at the term accountability, it majorly refers to the liability of the government servants to give a satisfactory account of the use of their official power to or their discretionary authority to the people. So the concept of accountability is an essential feature, thus for all forms of a democratic government, if you see. It's then again considered as an effective safeguard against the misuse of power or the abuse of the political authority. So the substance of the accountability actually places at least uh, few requirements on the public administrators. So when you see about the liability of the government servants towards a people, so what is that liability all about? So it is one of that liability is to make laws work as intended within a minimum wastage or a minimum delay. The second liability that the the public servants should have is to exercise lawful and sensible administrative discretion. The third one is to recommend new policies and propose changes in existing policies and programs as needed, also to enhance the citizen confidence in the administrative institutions. So these are few of those liabilities the public servants should have towards the citizens, uh, and also so that they can give a satisfactory account of their use of official power. Oh, this is in simple terms the accountability the public servant should show towards the power or the position given to the person. So then again, this notion of accountability, it's majorly about two connotations. If you see, one is answerability of the public servant, which majorly stands for the obligation of the public officials to inform about and explain actually what they are doing. And the second one, the second notion, if you see, of accountability is about the enforcement, that is the capacity of the accounting agencies to impose sanctions on the power holders who have violated their public duties, if you see. So that's about the concept of accountability, if you see, or the administrative accountability when we see. So we since we are concerned about the citizen centric administration in India, so we have to look at what the administrative accountability in India, or what is the present condition of it, and if there are some barriers to its development, or is it facing some kind of limitations also. So we are going to discuss about that now. So the administrative accountability in India is generally enforced by the means of various controls which ensure that the public servants are actually exercising their powers and discretions, definitely in accordance with the laws and regulations. So, like as a student of political science, you well know about the three pillars of our governance: legislature, executive, and the judiciary. And you well know about the controls, the checks and balances. That is the word majorly we use. Normally or generally we use the checks and balances. The three pillars of our governance bring into the administration, and that we are talking actually about those controls, the to maintain the administrative accountability in India. So then again, these administrative controls in India, we generally divide it into two: the internal and also the external. Like then again, if you ask me what is the purpose of controlling the administrative accountability, or controlling majorly, or what is the purpose of this administrative accountability. So the major aim behind that is to ensure that the public servants are actually exercising the powers given to them uh, within the account, or within, or even with the accordance of with the laws and the regulations. So that there the need of these two controls, administrative controls, come into effect: the internal and the external one. So the internal control actually operates from within the administrative machinery. So majorly the techniques of internal control are the budgetary system, the hierarchical order, the inquiries, the investigations, then also the press group, the pressure groups, the press, the annual confidential reports. So these are few of the internal control machinery within the administration. Then there are also the external accountability over administration in India, which is majorly maintained through the legislative, executive, and the judicial control. So the three major pillars of governance, establishing or maintaining their control over the administration. So the first, the administration is actually responsible towards the elected representatives, because in a democracy, of course, people are considered as supreme. So that's where the legislature comes into effect, or legislature comes into the power, or into the scene, to say that it has given certain powers through the it has been given through the constitution, through and also through various conventions, so that it is able to keep an effective check upon the malpractices and also the abuse of authority by the administration. So the legislature actually applies a number of methods for controlling the administration. Some of them are like asking the questions during question hours in the parliament, or the parliamentary discussions, the parliamentary audits, the non-confidence motion, also complaints to the ombudsman, are some of these methods. Then the second one within the external control is the executive control over the administration. Uh, that is again another potent instrument in our responsible government. So the executive control over administration are again exercised through a number of means and techniques, like the power of appointment and removal of various positions, then the rule making power, then the ordinances, the civil service code is there, then the delegated legislation, the again the budgetary system, also making appeal to the public opinion, etc. Then another major instrument through which the administrative accountability is ensured is through the judiciary control. So this may take the shape of the statutory appeal to the suits and writs against the government, the judicial review, then these days the public interest litigations, the bills. So the primary objective of such a judicial control over administration is the protection of the rights and liberties of citizens by ensuring the legality of the administrative acts. So then again, the accountability question needs to be seen in the background of a paradigm shift that has actually taken place in public administration. So so in the practical world of public administration, if you say today, these paradigm shift in the accountability of administration, it's generally uh, it's actually between two closely competing paradigms. The one is the new public management, and the other one is the good governance. So if you see historically, as we have uh, discussed in previous classes, the liberal democratic setup evolved the basic mechanisms of accountability, such as that of, say, the ministerial control or the parliamentary debate. So, even the ombudsman system. So, in the recent times, if you see, there has been some major changes, or even a sort of a paradigm shift in the mode of the public governance under under the rubrics of new public management and governance, good governance, to say. So if in the case of the contemporary public administration, what is being actually advocated is a market centered, a neoliberal approach to governance, under which the objectives of the governance are shifted to majorly towards the economic growth and also the productivity, and its normative standards are again redirected towards efficiency, competition, that of profit, then the services for value for money. So these are actually a few of the contemporary objectives of the governance when is being looked from a new public management approach. Uh, then again, this is actually a radical departure from the traditional norms and objectives of governance, enhancing the human progress, or for removing the poverty and even the unemployment, or even for safeguarding the citizens' rights, if you say, or then like guaranteeing the justice and fairness. So many of these has been ensured. So there has thus emerged this unique set of challenges for the realization of the accountability in the current phase of the public administrative changes everywhere, if you see. So the contemporary changes in governance towards this efficiency, towards the outcome, competition, this value for money, even the customer orientation. These pose, of course, formidable political, managerial, or even methodological challenges to the accountability, of course, and that can be in the standards of the accountability or the agents, the accountability for whom we are, accountability for what we are concerning, or how is that accountability so far can be ensured. So, so far as standards of accountability are concerned, these have, under the current mode of governance, become so instrumental in nature, placing emphasis more on the procedural and also the economic criteria, such as, of course, the efficiency and productivity. Than on the substantive concerns like equality and representation. So that's where the we consider that the public policy is actually accountable for an effective delivery of its services to uh, customers who can pay, while it may remain indifferent towards low income or the poor citizens who are not in position to use such services to their financial incapacity. So so that's like, in this era of governance, the accountability of the administration has actually shifted, therefore, from the common people to customers who can afford the customer charges. So that again brings in uh, a paradigm shift, or that again brings in a challenge to the responsive governance of the country, uh, of where they are, the administration is actually shifting its focus from the common people to those of customers who can afford the charges that's being imposed on them, or even the citizens, or the people who have a financial incapacity to adhere the public services. So there we have to look at how the administration is actually planning to adhere, uh, or redress, or bring in a machinery or a mechanism to address the grievances, or the complaints, or the complaints due to the non-fulfillment of certain demands and expectations of the people when it's not met. So how the administration is trying to redress that, or trying to cope up with that, or bring what are the machineries that the administration is taking up for that. So that part we will deal in the next class to come. So I hope this much part is clear to all of you, and if you have some questions, please raise your hands and please open your mic. And yeah. Yes. Yes, Sarth.
Ma'am, I want to say that the state is controlling the oxygen supply, like you mentioned in the beginning, then why introduce a PLI standardized phone system in this sector also?
Sorry, it's not clear to me. The voice is not clear to me.
I mean, electronic manufacturing, then why
Mhm.
don't did this in the oxygen sector of the ongoing pandemic to private players?
Asra, can you please switch off your mic for a second? I cannot listen to the question raised by Sat. Can you please repeat, Sat? I'm really sorry. I cannot. Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm saying that why don't we introduce the PLI scheme in the
Mm-hmm.
sector of companies who are producing liquid oxygen to the patients of ongoing pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
like one regime introduced in electronic producing.
Mm-hmm. Of course, that is actually a great idea, and like to cope up with the current pandemic situation and current requirement of the oxygen supply, this can be one of the methods we can imply. But then let's hope government will consider such, and it's very early to comment on this because yeah.
And the second question, ma'am, of mine is
Mm-hmm.
is what the government is
Mm-hmm.
uh, currently a paradigm shift in the politics of they are reducing the subsidy and all that thing, and
Mm-hmm.
they also encouraging citizens in India to participate in the public dealing service. Why it
Mm-hmm.
is, ma'am, still considered a low or irrelevant services in India?
Which service is considered irrelevant?
The public policy making that there are very low rate of citizen participant and all that thing.
Of course. Okay. Regarding that, okay, the you are
Yes.
asking about the people's participation, the low rates of people participation, and in the policy making, and also you have raised another question about the l- what is it? Low regarding the what was the first part? Can you please repeat that?
Ma'am, I'm saying that there is also the public policy making. There is the
Mm-hmm.
distraction or the off cut of public policy bureaucrats and the public participation,
Mm-hmm.
despite being lack of their rights, but and enlightened. Sorry to say, intelligentsia is still aware of their public privacy rights. But why
Mm-hmm.
there is not just very few and not not many people are coming, but why this whole thing happen and why it is considered an irrelevant in the country, in this country? I mean to
Mm-hmm.
say mean to say grievance of intelligentsia also facing
Mm-hmm. Okay.
in
Okay, okay, I got your point. So, like one of the thing about the subsidies and the public policies that we are talking about in the present time period or in the recent times. So, post the 1990s, if you see, India has actually administered the neoliberal policies, and the international organizations just like the WTO or the International Monetary Fund or even the World Bank, so they have put forward several guidelines before us, saying that informally it's like that if you need more of this you have already taken this much huge amounts of loans from different organizations, and if you are trying to increase the amount again, or if you are trying to make a new loans, so government is again government has to repay it at the someday or the other. So how can that be done when we are moving from our deficit every time we are seeing these days our deficit budget is happening. So if you remember about the deficit budget that we discussed in the previous class, where the expenditure is actually more than the receipts that we are receiving in India. So there one of the reasons where government has to control is the subsidies that's being provided, but that doesn't say that government is completely controlling on the subsidies that is being provided to the citizens or being provided to various policies. Then again, of course, we haven't seen such great policies, public policies coming towards to coming in effect. But then again, if you see at the budget, the recent budgets, you can see that without bringing new policies into consideration, government is actually trying to enhance, or government is actually trying to uh, include more areas or more aspects of consideration within the existing policies, and increasing the expenditure on that, or increasing the money spent on the existing policies. Of course, that can be seen. Then the next question, that's about the uh, people's participation in the in India per se, or obviously, because we have seen that the people's participation, it's actually a mere participation we can see in India. So if you remember the barriers that we have discussed during discussing the people's participation in India. So one of the major barriers that comes to my mind right now is about, definitely about the illiteracy that we have in India. So you know that, you well know that the literacy levels in India, the literacy levels in the rural and urban areas of India, how much poor it is. uh, in few of the states, it's completely like uh, you cannot even imagine that the literacy levels are so poor in several of the states. So that is one of the major causes of the lack of people's participation, if you see. uh, then the other that again leads to the second thing, that is about the awareness the people have about the various policies and practices that we have, or various programs, or various programs even to which they can avail as a free service from the government. So that is there again. Like just a a few moments before, I gave you an example from my personal experience. Being a little bit educated, even I was unaware about the various services that I have in within my locality. So how can you expect an illiterate person, or of a person, even in the case of women, if you see in the rural areas, for them the world is their home. They hardly move out of their to the outskirts of their home. So for such a person, how can you expect that the person will be aware of the policies, the public policies or the programs? Then again, the language that the public policies or the programs that are being mandated. So that is not like merely that cannot be merely understood by a common person. So somebody has to explain it to them. So that is again another barrier in the case of people's participation in India. Then there are several other like, even if you see in the case uh, of a representative of a constituency. So when the representative of a constituency generally meets a bureaucrat in regards to the public policy that is being formulated, so he or she may generally put forward their personal interest or their individual interest, rather than considering the constituency's general cause. So that is again there. Then again, like, even though we say that there is a decentralization in India from the 73rd and the 74th amendment, we have this in hand. There is a bottom top approach of the policy making is there. But do you exactly think that it is a reality in India? That is not a practical side, it's of obviously the theoretical side of it. For simple, for example, I can give you the uh, Pradhan Pati syndrome, that if you remember we have discussed in the class when we were discussing about the critical evaluation of the 73rd amendment. of course there is a reservation of women in the rural areas or in the local self governments if you see. But there are many women, there are because of their reservation, women are being even elected to the post of pradhan. But when you go to several rural areas, there in the name of the pradhan there is this woman, but actually the power resides with her husband or the other stronger male member in the family. That can be either her husband or her in-law, so anybody within that. So that is the pradhanpati syndrome when we are talking about. So that is again a barrier. Even though you are given the reservation, you are not completely utilizing it. So that is there. So these are few of the barriers if you see in the case of the people's participation in India to see. Yeah, I hope that's
Ma'am,
clear to
last,
Sat.
and yes, and ma'am, last question is one last question, that
Mm-hmm.
why is ma'am Kerala and some other northeastern states are
Mm-hmm.
the model for bureaucratic and all other public dealing? I mean to say all other public sector dealing in
Mm-hmm.
spite of rest of India, even in center as well. I mean to
Uh,
say, what
huh.
reading to Kerala and Northeast case studies, that they are always a leader, projectile leader in dealing their bureaucracy and all other public dealing like transport facility and infrastructure. But ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
why are they apart from rest of the India? Even center is not center
Mm-hmm.
center infrastructure
I
is
got
not.
you. I got your point. The difference between the development models of the southern, of course, Kerala and the northeastern parts, in comparison to the other states that you are asking about. So, if you look at the development model of Kerala, if you consider it as a model of development, then like I belong to Kerala, and I well know that we actually had a very planned economy or a very planned development since Kerala was conceptualized, or since we got the statehood. So, if you see that, of
Ma'am,
course.
earlier sorry to interrupt you. Even ma'am, I also reading yesterday that Kerala is the oxygen surplus state in India, and despite there are no plants in oxygen manufacturing in Delhi, and they are
Definitely,
importing. Yes, then
definitely,
why
yeah.
it is all about thing?
That is what I'm explaining. So, if once the state was actually conceptualized, the major focus we actually led was on the development of the basic facilities to say. Of course there is petty politics that is happening in each and every state, even Kerala, even in the northeastern states if you see, it's there. But then again the major focus is actually given to the basic facilities that is required for the people since the beginning. Then if you see the land, if you see the land rights that during the initial phases 1950s 60s, so there again we had this very much like a very planned system of land distribution that we had. So that again had a major impact. Then like of course the presence of communist regimes since the beginning of the statehood was there. So their major focus was on socialism if you see. So
Yeah.
then again we had this higher rates of immigration from Kerala towards the Gulf countries as an informal labor or of labor, unskilled labor. Again the remittance they are sending back to Kerala that were actually majorly used for the development of say the education system or the health facilities. So we had actually tried, even in northeastern states they had actually tried to bring it from the scratch. We are not trying to bring it from the top. We were trying actually to prepare it from the base, and the base was so strong enough that we were actually we could actually resist the entrance of the barriers that were coming to each and every time. If there a barrier exists or a barrier appears in the way of development, we actually try to break it through. So either through our basic facilities that we had, if you see, that's one of the major examples that Kerala is one of the 100% literate countries and the highest literate country state in the country, if you see, in comparison to any other state. Even the many of the northeastern states, even Sikkim is one of the highest literate states in the country, to say. So the development model that was administered, that was planned, that was not like any other development models that you cannot find a planned development model in any other state, if you see, other than that of course Kerala has this. Then there are planned development models from Sikkim, you see, you can see in Sikkim it's there, even to a part you can see there it is in Mizoram also. You can see Manipur, of 50% of the development that's happening, it's actually based on the planned model. So that's why the thing is there. And in the case of the COVID oxygen supply you were saying, so if you see in the case of Kerala, like with the beginning of the pandemic, we were one of the states actually uh, understood that the pandemic is there. There are patients in India, there are patients in Kerala who are actually affected by the pandemic. Even the first case was reported in Kerala, if you see, if you remember. So the to understand the barriers before us, before the administration, so that is one of the major things they always put towards their administrative system. If you see, they will understand what the problems are, then they will try to solve it. But here it's that the problem will be growing to a very higher level, then they will think about the solutions towards it. So that is the major problem. So you have to understand the basic, the grassroots level. Again, when we are talking about the administration, we normally say that you have to look at the administration from a grassroots level. They know what their problems are. So if you administer that, then it's very much easier for you to address the problems in the center. So you may not even have major problems in the center to administer with. So I think that's clear.
Yeah, ma'am. You clear, very crystal clear.
Okay. Okay. So any next question? Yeah, Muskan, please. Yes, Muskan, you can raise your question.
Share your slides again. Actually, I couldn't take any screenshot. I was a bit late.
No issues. I'll share the notes, teaching notes in the WhatsApp group that was created.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any other question? If you have some question, please raise.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am, I have one question. Do you have any idea when might be when will the books be uploaded on the college website?
As of now, I have no information regarding that. Uh, what I can do is that I can provide you the teaching notes that I have and the reference material that I'm using.
Yeah, that will be helpful, ma'am. So, are you going to be uploading it here, or you'll be sending it somewhere else?
I'll share it with you on the WhatsApp group that has been created, and if you are there.
Actually, ma'am, I'm not in that group. So, any idea how can I join?
Yeah, like you can ask any of your classmates over here who can help you with that. You can share the mobile numbers with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone, please help me. Please add me to the group.
You can just share your mobile number on the chat in the chat box, and anybody from the class can help you in that. No issues.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So if there are no more questions, I think I should end the class for the day. So is there